Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today, Dr. John Weil, the Dean of the Political Science Department at Middle Tennessee State University. We're trying to put some perspective into the Tuesday election for president with Donald J. Trump, now our president-elect. Dr. Weil, Donald J. Trump won the Electoral College, but Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. That is bound to always bring up the question about why do we do it with the Electoral College and not with the popular vote? Why shouldn't the people rule on that?
And it's pretty complicated. And of course, what's interesting is these are probably the two closest elections that we've had in American history where the winner of the popular vote, going back to 2000, so 16 years, where the winner of the popular vote was not also the winner of the Electoral College.
It's happened 5 times overall in American history.
Well, one of those is a little tricky. The Andrew Jackson in 24, he had a plurality, but there were 4 candidates running. But yes, I mean, it's relatively rare. The Electoral College, there are a lot of reasons for it. It's much like Congress, it's an indirect form of democracy.
The Founding Fathers didn't like the idea of having a direct election for that. They didn't trust democracies like that in those days.
They thought popular rule was important, but they thought that it needed to be filtered.
They thought it might be tyrannical.
They did. And of course, you know, later Alexis de Tocqueville talks about the tyranny of the majority and advocates for civil liberties today.
And the electoral vote is based on the number of representatives, and everybody gets 2 senators, so you get 2 electoral colleges. It was based in part on population and try to give the smaller states a chance.
It's primarily based on population because there are 435 members of the U.S. House, and so you get 1 elector for each of them. 10 for the U.S. Senate, and then there's been an amendment that gives 3 votes to the District of Columbia.
Should the Electoral College be changed? Should it be abolished and go to a popular vote? Would our Founding Fathers, if they came back today and saw the way our democracy works today, would they be okay about changing that?
It's hard to know. We're already very far from what they envisioned, because what they really envisioned was, you know, I would elect you, and you would go to the state, and you would cast a vote the way you thought I would if I knew what you knew. And that's, you know, we rarely have faithless electors anymore. You know, we elect someone with the understanding that they're going to vote for Trump or they're going to vote for Clinton, and that's what we expect them to do.
There is a move, you mentioned faithless electors, there is a move out there now, people who are unhappy with the result, to try to get some of the electors for Trump to change their mind. There's not much opportunity that's going to happen?
There's very little. I mean, every election or two you'll have 1 or 2 delegates. There was one actually in 2000 who decided that, you know, the election had been rigged or whatever, and they cast their vote in a different way. But it's not likely to be effective.
But because the suffrage is so much larger, when we put the Constitution together in the 1700s, there was no women were voting, no blacks, no African Americans could vote. Basically, you had to have land and property to vote. Have we changed enough as a democracy that perhaps we ought to look at that? Because it does seem to be confusing to an awful lot of people.
It does. Again, the big obstacle is the only apparent way to change the Electoral College is through the amending process. And we have one of the most difficult ones in the world. And, you know, imagine, I mean, if you're a Republican today, do you want to change the Electoral College? It's giving you 2 presidents you otherwise wouldn't have had. If you were a Democrat, you might. But, you know, there was just as much speculation. I was among those who thought that Hillary might very well be the one who would win the Electoral College and not win the popular vote. So,
the one last question about the Constitution. The Constitution, it seems to me, is more an agreement between the federal government and the states, not between the federal government and the voters. That's more in the Bill of Rights, protections there for individuals.
There is certainly an element, you know, one of the strongest arguments for the Electoral College is that it does strengthen state political parties. It gives each party a stake in trying to deliver their state. Now, on the opposite side, there are so many states that are so solidly blue or solidly red that, you know, there's not a lot of reason to continue working in that state for the president's campaign.
There's been an awful lot of reaction. We knew going into the election, one thing that was very easily predictable, is that there were going to be a lot of people unhappy with this outcome, a lot of people
Yes.
happy with this outcome.
Yes.
But is that sort of amplified by the social media atmosphere we have today? There's an awful lot of things that can go up there all the time very quickly. They can become trending. It also tends to be kind of impersonal in a lot of ways. Is that sort of making this ability to try to come together after this a lot
It's
harder?
like we're surrounded with so much information, but it is so polarized. You know, I find this when I go to talk to local groups. You can go to a conservative group and a liberal group, and they have completely different sources of information, completely different rumors that they have, usually far-fetched on both sides.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the senator from New York, once said, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but nobody's entitled to their own set of facts. But in Facebook, you really can be entitled to your own.
Well, pretty much.
You can find your own set of facts.
Virtual reality or unreality, yes.
So can this country come back together again? What is it going to take to bring us all together? Or is that just sort of a goal we'd all like to achieve? We almost never really get there anyway.
Well, in some ways, we don't want to come completely together. We have a system that's based on separation of powers, that's based on built-in conflict. You don't want a president of either party to be able to come in and do everything that they want, but usually we have a honeymoon period when a new president is elected, and I think we can expect that.
As you look back over history, does Donald Trump face a situation which perhaps Hillary Clinton would as well had she won, that perhaps he comes into being president and she would have too, with a most divided country maybe since 1860 when Abraham Lincoln was assuming the presidency?
Well, you know, we weren't too far. I mean, nothing is going to compare, obviously, to 1860, but if you look at the election of 2000, just think of how long it took us even to figure out who the winner was. And, you know, primarily, I think because of the events of 9/11, the country was pretty much forced to unify, at least for a period, just in reaction to that. So a lot of times external events can have more effect than we think.
Dr. John Weil, who's the Dean of the Political Science Department at Middle Tennessee State University, is our guest. We're trying to bring some perspective to the presidential election, which was held last Tuesday. Back to continue our conversation after you watch these messages.